Leadership is hard, and I've got some good news and I've got some bad news for you. The bad news is that I can't make it any easier, but the good news is that we can work on it together to get better. And you want to know the secret? Who you are comes before what you do. It's form before function. So let's get to work together. I'm Preston Poore, and this is PQ. Hey, welcome everybody to today's episode of PQ. I'm excited to introduce Matt Hurd. Matt's the author of Life with a Capital L, Embracing Your God-Given Humanity. You know, I first heard Matt on a Colson Fellows Program video call. It was part of the curriculum that I took during that, and his message struck a chord with me. I remember taking all kinds of notes and bought the book, reached out to him, and had a wonderful initial conversation. And his book, it challenges us to move beyond just going through life and embracing it with a life of purpose and really living out a life with purpose. So in the conversation that we're going to have, we're going to be diving into how leaders can find meaning, purpose, and joy, and not just for them, but for those around you as well. And if you've ever felt like that you're just going through the motions, ever felt like that you're struggling through things, you don't want to miss this conversation. So hey, let's have fun real quick, Matt. I want to do this. Instead of going right into the interview questions, let's take a second. I want to tell the audience how you and I met. I was part of the Colson Fellows program, and I was commissioned last May. And part of the curriculum, it's a pretty rigorous curriculum. One of those was watching a live stream video with you on it. And I was so moved and compelled by your message that I took copious notes. And as I wrote those notes down, I said, I've got to look into this guy. I started looking into you, trolling you a little bit, if you will, and then about your book, Life with a Capital L. And then I had I got the cojones, if you will, to reach out to you. And I started, as I did the research too, Matt, the fun thing was we have a lot in common. Things like Colorado, state of Alabama, travel. In your book, you write about things about Russia. I had a chance to go there with work and things like that. And so I said, hey, could you chat for a little bit? And we did. And that blossomed into today. So I want to tell you how much I appreciate you being open, if you will, to today's discussion.
Absolutely. I'm delighted to do this with you, Preston. I'm actually grateful that the first conversation you had with me didn't just kibosh any desire you had for further conversations. It's really
We still have
encouraging.
about a half
A lot
hour.
of times people talk to me once and they say, okay, I'm glad that's done.
No more Matt. Hey, so let's go into this. I know that we want to talk. I do want to talk about your career a little bit and all the things that you have going on as we go through the conversation on it. But I do want to dive right into this book, Life with a Capital L. You see all the sticky notes that I've got in there for place bookmarks. We're not going to cover all those today, certainly, but that's just where I read things and took notes and did underlining. So it's a powerful message. And the reason I wanted to talk to you, Matt, and it's so important for people to hear, is that I have a friend named Drew that once told me that most Christians look like they were weaned on a pickle. You know what they mean? It means that they're all these faces all puckered up and they're all serious and all that all the time. And what I got from your book, and hopefully the listeners today will get from your message, is that life is so much more than that in our relationship with our Heavenly Father. So I want to go there, though. Tell me about your inspiration for the book. Why did you write it? What was the driving message behind the book? What brought you to this point where you felt like you had to articulate something in writing and put it into a book?
Sure. Well, I love talking about it. And so, I mean, to do a 4-hour podcast is something that doesn't intimidate me at all. So I'm looking forward to these next few hours to unpack that very question.
No.
Because it's a deep passion for me. Just kidding to the listeners. But so it came out of, I'm comfortable in the marketplace space as well as the ministry space. And so I've been a pastor of a couple of mega churches over time. I dove into the Gospel of John, and it came out of something that had been brewing for many years. But there's a word, a 3-letter word in Greek, Z-O-E is the transliteration, Zoe, and it began to bubble to the top. Now, I've seen this over the years. It had been a passion of mine over the years, but then started to realize how overriding in terms of importance the message of Zoe is. Now, when I say Zoe, it's referred in English, it's translated life. And but it's a different kind of life. There are a couple other Greek words that are also translated life. There's bios, biological, that's heart beating, lung breathing. There's psyche, transliterated Psyche, with consciousness, psychology. So someone can be alive physically, biologically, they can be alive cognitively, mentally, but Zoe has to do with being alive with the life of God. And I over the years came to Christ in high school, but didn't really start growing, but started realizing over time, this whole notion that we are born dead in our sinful state. Thinking, what does that mean? I'm alive, but what am I dead to? I'm dead to this life of God that is what enables me to ultimately be fulfilled as a human being, and it's the way that God created me. So that was the undercurrent, the specific part of writing this book, Life with a capital L. A couple of things. One, and principally, is my sons. I have 3 boys. My wife will tell you she has 4, which is probably true. It was a kind of a Mack truck motivation, meaning I need to get this down on paper for my sons. If I get hit by a truck tomorrow, they'll at least have it. So from the first keystroke in writing it, it was to them. I didn't think of, when I was done with the book, okay, who could I dedicate this to? It was from the very first day I immersed. I resigned from my church. I'd signed a contract like 5 years before, but hadn't had time to write. And so I immersed, and it was all mapped out, but they knew, and they would ask me, "Hey, Pops, how's our book coming along?" And so that was a personal motivation. But then there's a broader, and that is for people to actually engage with the gospel in a holistic way. I think so often, and I'm sure your listeners are all over the map, as we all are, and that's beautiful to have a conversation. But so often, especially people from the outside looking in, perceive this Christianity thing as about heaven. And a lot of times that's coming from people within the church saying, well, the gospel is about us being forgiven of our sins and getting to heaven. Yes, but it is so much more than that. And it's about us being restored into the original trajectory that we're made for. And that's where that Zoe comes in. And there's that tree of life in Genesis that we're exiled from, not out of punishment, but simply out of us electing to say we can be a fulfilled human being without God. And that's all of our postures without the gospel. So we're exiled from life. We're going to come back to that at the end, at the end of Revelation. We're restored to the tree of life. But in the meantime, Jesus said this, and you talk about a mission statement, just from a leadership standpoint. Jesus had he didn't come to start a religion, start a holiday. He said, I've come, John 10:10, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, directly related to what went on in the garden, because the enemy came along and robbed us of the Zoe. And he says, but I've come that you might have Zoe and have it to the full. So bottom line, that message is for us to embrace the gospel, not in a happy clappy, life with a capital L doesn't mean everything's fine, but it's me extracting the significance of who I am as an image bearer and living that out on a daily basis, not just waiting to happen.
That's so good. I heard one time John Maxwell say, I was at a conference a few years back with him, and he has a section, I think, early in the morning before the rest of the conference goes on, Matt, where he preaches basically. But he said that same thing. He said that I want the life, but I want the comma. What's after the comma? It's the full life, right? Life abundantly, or an abundant life. And so, so true that people are trying to figure out how to fill and get that abundant life on their own, and experiencing humanity without that relationship it creates a lot of issues, right? Hey, so let's go on to this idea then, because I think we can softball and move into this transition. The ideas around this living fully alive, and one of the core themes of your book is living fully alive rather than just going through the motions. So for someone who feels like that they're stuck in the day-to-day grind, how, Matt, would they begin the journey of living with more meaning and purpose? How would they do that? If they're stuck in the grind, they're just surviving day to day. What do they do?
So going through the motions, right?
Yeah.
The just this morning, Leonardo da Vinci. I'm sure you were expecting me to mention, but
Who is he?
you were just waiting for that. But he talked about and I don't have that quote right in front of me, but he says the average human looks without seeing, hears without listening, eats without tasting, and he moves through where we're just going through the motions. We're not engaging in the moments, and a lot of it's a twofold process. One is to own up for what I'm thirsty for. That with some people that are in church and they kind of think that everybody just is wired into wanting to be forgiven of their sins and go to heaven. We're in a post Christian culture. Very few people are waking up. That's a need, but people aren't waking up. Go to a local coffee shop. They're not saying, I didn't wake up this morning saying, how can I be forgiven of my sins and get to heaven? Even though that's pertinent. But what they are saying is, in a various ways, how can I be fully alive? Now, they might not term it in that way, but how can I extract the marrow out of my journey and not just go through the motions? Now, you and I grew up in Alabama. I don't know if did you grow up in Alabama? You just said that, or you just
My wife did. I lived in Alabama for a while.
Okay, so you know the language there as a result.
I do.
So am I scratching where you're itching? That's what they'll say in Alabama. So circle back around. Am I scratching where you're itching with that question?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Sure. I think it's the person that I'm thinking about, a young professional, whether they're in New York City, they're California, they're in the Midwest somewhere, and they're just kind of going through the motions, and they don't see a purpose. It's a couple things I saw, Matt, recently. We have a loneliness epidemic, right? Out in America. They say that's one of the biggest concerns. I think the CDC said that recently. And also, there's an issue out there with people trying to fill themselves with things like pornography, which is prevalent now more so in the church and outside the church more than ever. So the question is, they're looking to be fully alive some way on their own. And so they may be finding out that those things aren't filling them. And so I guess the question becomes is, how do they move toward that journey of finding who and what their purpose is in life? How would you counsel somebody on that if they were struggling that way?
Sure. I mean, so a moment ago I said kind of two parts. One is owning up to that thirst to be fully alive. Then the second is, okay, how am I going to get there? What do I do to become fully alive? I think it can start with a very simple question. What would it? You don't have to have the answer, but just to ask the question. All right, what would it look like for me to be fully alive? Because a lot of people would say, oh yeah, I'd like to be fully alive. Well, then what's that going to look like? And then beginning to dig into that, it goes back to worldview. I believe it goes back even to our view of God. I mean, my view of God as a human being is the axis around which the rest of my life turns. That's not just true for Christian people, church people. It's true for every human being. And atheists, same thing is true. Their view of God is the axis around which the rest of their life turns. So then it's a matter of, okay, do I believe that there is a God? If I do, am I created? If I'm created, what's my purpose? And then beginning to dig into, all right, how do I get kind of locked into that purpose? How do I enter that soup, enter that stream, enter that flow? And finding out, all right, is there an owner's manual? And then you go to scripture. It's not a religious book. It's not a religious handbook. That's not the intent, but it's a letter to us. Yes, written over centuries, but amazingly, that can lead us into not just what to do on Sundays, and what to check on our census box regarding our religious affiliation, but how do we get restored into the reason that we're made? And so that fully alive has everything to do with me savoring my existence, submitting that existence to the one who made me, and walking in alignment with it. And all of a sudden, realizing that every aspect of my life enables me the opportunity, if I seize it, to say, I'm a human being created in God's image. I'm here, and I'm here for a purpose. And for me in this moment, whether it's with a client or at the doctor's office or at a ball game, to say, I'm here, and I'm here to extract something from this existence, but not ultimately for my benefit, but ultimately for God's glory. And in the process, I'm blessed and benefited immensely.
That's good. So let me push a little bit. We used that phrase at the Coca-Cola company when I was there, and they would say, if I push them and it was okay, they'd say good push. So hopefully you say good push after this. What, I guess that's very, forgive this, esoteric, very heady, right? So bring that down to reality. What does that look like in Matt Hurd's life? What does that look like in somebody's life? I understand what you're saying from an academic perspective. Bring it down to me. What's it actually look like? I heard you give 3 examples like baseball or whatever on it, but help elaborate for the listener what that might look like in application.
All right. Let me push back on you just for a second. We say, what does it look like? Yeah. Define it. And then I'll address the question.
That's fine. So if I hear what Matt's saying and I go read this book, what would my life look like? Let's take it even further. Suppose I'm a young professional working, and I'm between the age of 25 to 40 right now. How is my life different at work? How's my life different at home? What does it look like if I'm living life with a capital L?
I'm paying attention to what's going. Oh, sorry. Oh yeah, I'm paying attention to you too.
Oh, thank you.
Just every word. Right? It means I am paying attention at every moment, and I'm paying attention in context of the significance of that moment. Okay. That's the significance of that moment for me and my sense of meaning. The significant, and so often we get this deal where we do the spiritual thing at church, and then everything else. And this secular sacred divide, I believe, is something that's contrived. It's all integrated, but I'm paying attention to the fact that I'm not a lucky blob of protoplasm that came into being by accident. I've got purpose. Mm-hmm. So paying attention to that particular moment and making an intentional decision to connect those moments with the big picture. I'm a press box guy. I'm constantly, on a given day, I'm scrambling from the field up to the press box, to the field up to the press box. What's happening here? Okay, what's the significance of this moment regarding my journey, my longings, where I'm coming from in terms of my thirst as a human being, the people around me, the leadership that I'm doing, and so often we get lost in just the minutia, mm-hmm. that we don't climb up in the press box and say, what is the significance of this moment in my overall purpose? So one of the things that I do very practically is I have a series of words that I personally use every day. And at the beginning of the day and the end, maybe beginning, hey, how am I going to be fully alive today? At the end of the day, evaluation, was I fully alive? There are 12 words, there are plenty more. I've just come up with them. I call them my Thrive Daily Dozen. And so these 12 realities determine whether or not I'm thriving and being fully alive. And I've got them alphabetized so that they're easy to remember. They're alphabetized not according to their priority, just the first letter enables me to remember it. All: brokenness, creativity, depth, engagement, fellowship, generosity, heart, intimacy, journey, kindness, longing. And spend a lot of time talking about every one of those. But yet, am I living today with a sense of awe, where I'm paying attention to the beauty around me, whether it's the cackle of a child, the majesty of a mountain, the intricacy of a strategic plan? Am I living with a sense of awe? And and then connecting with the author of that awe. So I won't go through all of them, but these are just a couple of examples.
Yeah.
B, brokenness. Last time I checked, I'm going to encounter brokenness today, either in my life or in the life of some people around me. Could be small, could be big, in the culture that I'm in. And so how am I stewarding that brokenness, stewarding that pain, stewarding that disappointment? Okay, the didn't get that contract. Have to fire this person, or got fired.
Yeah.
How the worst kind of pain is wasted pain. So am I paying attention to the brokenness, not just medicating myself to kill the pain, but doing the buffalo thing, where instead of running away from the storm, I head into it and face up to it. So third, creativity. And I'll do two more, the C and the D. Creativity. I'm made in the image of God. The first clue we get regarding what God is like in Scripture is in the first sentence. In the beginning, God created. So if I'm made in the image of God, I'm a creator. I'm a maker. What am I going to make today? It could be a concept. It could be a cure for cancer. It could be a kind word. It could be any number of what am I going to create and today? Not just as an artist in the sense of whatever it is. I mentioned strategic plan a minute ago. The beauty of showing up to work and dealing with, okay, what am I going to not just react to, but what problems am I going to solve by creating solutions? Then D, depth. Have I lived today with a sense of depth? I think it was Richard Foster who said that superficiality is a curse of our age. And we are always just looking at what's happening, not what's underneath the surface. So paying attention to all that's going on, but then having a sense of perspective where I go deeper. I'm of the conviction that Scripture anchors that, where I can look at the events, but also look behind them. Imagine the keel of a sailboat. I was speaking at an event in Maine a couple of weeks ago. I had my very first ever small 30-foot sailboat experience. It was me and the guy who owned the boat. The only other sailing experience I had was when I was with a kid. I mean, I've been on big sailboats, but the smaller ones was a sunfish. A buddy of mine, when we were 9 or 10, we snuck out with his big brother's sunfish at the lake house and left the keel on the grass on the side of the lake because we didn't know what that was. Of course, we figured out really quickly when the wind came, there was no stability. And so often, one of the ways that we get so stressed in our journeys is we have no depth. There's nothing under the surface. We're just going from moment to moment and just trying to survive instead of, okay, let's be still and evaluate that. So the EFGH, so I actually go through those as a checklist, and there's plenty more, but that's just a start.
No, that's great. It's this idea of reflective thinking. And I often talk to people in the workshops I do, especially around decision making. I use this phrase, and I know obviously you're familiar with the first phrase. It's the Socrates said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I think that's what you're hinting at this,
right?
That examination of our lives, and you do it on a daily basis. It's funny though. When I tie it into decision making, I say the unexamined decision is not worth making. And what I mean by that is in the business world, we don't spend enough time thinking about the decisions we made, the results, and then how do we improve or change and stuff like that. So that reflective thinking that you mentioned will help us obviously see things over time, evaluate our day, what went well, what didn't go well, and then that helps us to be present and aware of where we are.
I love that.
Good.
And as you're talking, here's the quote from Da Vinci. The average human looks without seeing, listens without hearing, touches without feeling, eats without tasting, moves without physical awareness, inhales without awareness of odor or fragrance, and talks without listening. Now, that's a guy that, as far as I know, I don't know where he is spiritually, where he was spiritually, and probably wasn't a believer, but he was an amazingly thoughtful image bearer.
Oh yeah.
And imagine what would happen if an image bearer that's connecting with his or her creator is doing that.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
That's, and just want to jump on and not to pile on this too much, but it's kind of like C.S. Lewis talking about, having the opportunity to be at a vacation at sea versus playing with mud pies. And so settling for that. And I think the way Stephen Curtis Chapman put in one of his songs a long time ago was playing Game Boy while sitting in the Grand Canyon. So, right, you're not paying attention where you are. So really good. Thank you for going down that path with me real quick. Let's move into this.
The one thing that Lewis says in that quote, he says, we are far too easily pleased.
Yes, that's right.
Fooling around with drink and sex and ambition when infinite joy can be offered to us. Yeah. And we're like that little kid who's making mud pies in a slum because he can't imagine what's meant by the offer of a holiday by the sea.
Yeah.
And I think so often, for your listeners, some of what I love about what you're doing, don't be too easily pleased. I think that's part of the fabric of what you're up to.
Yeah, don't settle is a message on that, I think, right, too. There's so much more out there. Let's move into this idea of narrative on it. And before we go there, I want to actually talk about longing. And don't want to spend too much time here, but you talk about this idea of longing, and there's two phrases that I think are important to discuss briefly, would be significance and shalom. Most people are familiar with the word significance, maybe touched a little bit on longing, but shalom's not something we use in the English, in the English language very much to describe it. Can you tell us a little bit about those three terms and how that translate into a leader, if you would?
Sure. Three terms. I've got, my math isn't good. Significant, shalom. What's the third term?
And longing.
Oh, and longing. Okay. Yeah. So longing would be the umbrella. And we're all born thirsty. In fact, our longings are what determine what we do every day. And the more I pay attention to my longings, the better. There is a bell curve there. Obviously, we can become so introspective that we become paralyzed. But, we all have these thirsts. We're thirsty people. And the significance, we so ache to be significant. Shalom is a word you just brought up. It's, that's a typical greeting with Jewish people from a Hebrew standpoint, but it doesn't mean, a lot of people think, well, that just means peace. Now, shalom it is peace, but it's something, it goes deeper than that. Shalom is not the absence of conflict, but it's a holistic settledness that all of my life is connected, and I'm at peace, not from the absence of stress, but I'm whole. And then you start listing. Fantastic thing to do is to say, what are my longings? We have a longing for significance, for shalom, for security, for wholeness, for truth, beauty, goodness, resolution, impact. We want to make an impact. The list goes on and on. Then that's on one column. The other side is all the stuff that we're doing. Maybe you want to reverse them. What are the things that I'm up to? And the good stuff and the bad stuff. And if you're spiritually inclined, there's sinful stuff that we engage with. Put it all there. Then say, what are the longings that I'm trying to address through that? And any great film that I've seen taps are some kind of longing for justice, for connection, for purpose, for love. And any great film that's moved, other than maybe Dumb and Dumber, but some of the others, although Jeff Daniels would probably argue with that, Hollywood gets that list. And in fact,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
there's a German word called Sehnsucht. It's C.S. Lewis. I picked up from him. That means ache, longing, thirst, yearning, desire. And I've got a playlist on Spotify that it's called Sehnsucht. There's probably about 130 songs on there. And it's when I will hear a song, because art can act as a shutter that comes up to the art can act as a hand that comes up to the shutter of our heart. It kind of helps us articulate stuff that we couldn't otherwise articulate, whether it's song or literature or film. And all those songs, it's not a Christian list. Some of them might be believers, but they're articulating that thirst. And I would guess that we'll probably head there in a bit. But from a leadership standpoint, I need to be aware of my own longings. And all that I'm not, it's there. The longings I'm talking about are common to everyone. Could be at this particular moment, say connection is at the top of your list. And for me, maybe influence. Then 15 minutes from now, that reverse. So we all have the same longings. What differs is where we're going to see those longings fulfilled. And from a leadership standpoint, paying attention not only to my longings, but the longings of the people that I'm leading. Okay, what's behind what's going on in that person? And then
Why is that important? Why is that important to identify the longings of your associates, the team, the people, the above you, below you, around you? What does it matter?
fulfillment. I mean,
Tell me
is
more.
my job fulfilling? Everybody has now. A lot of people say, "Well, I'm doing this job for the paycheck." Okay, why? What's significant about a paycheck? Well, I want to be able to buy stuff, or I want to have security, or I want. And again, you start getting to there's some longs. I want freedom, and I think that financially I can gain freedom. So it's basically it's understanding what motivates. John Wooden. I had the privilege to meet him late in his life, the coach of UCLA, and he was a master at motivating his players by tapping into, okay, what are you really after here? Did he use the word longings? Who knows? I doubt it. But it's hey, what's motivating you? And from a leadership standpoint, understanding what is motivating your people. And so often it's having that desire for belonging. Maybe this person, they have a deep thirst for belonging. So I need to make sure they're in a team that's humming. This person has a deep thirst right now for impact. All right, let's get a high turnover job for them where they can see some results more quickly than others, et cetera.
Right. And everybody's motivated typically differently. And so that's the reason to tap in and understand the quote unquote longing behind that. So powerful. Very, very good.
Yeah, because from a leadership standpoint, so often, excuse me, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I cannot assume my team, I did, and you'll get over it. But my team, they're not all at that given moment. They all they have different longings. So often I'll see team leaders assume everybody has got the same motivation.
I've got a story going through my mind real quick, if you'll indulge me for a second. I used to work with a guy named Chuck, and I was in pet food sales for a long time. Actually, Chuck was managed by this same guy at different companies. That's confusing. But anyway, let me go on with the story. The guy sent out a cassette tape. This was years ago. And on it had some motivational music and some sayings on it. And he sent to all of his team members. And Chuck played it for me. And I listened, oh, that's pretty cool. And he turned it off. He goes, I think this stinks. And he goes, this does not motivate me. I don't know why he sent me this. And that made me think from that moment, all those years ago, that while I'm a manager, even though I think something might motivate a team member, it can't be blanketed to everybody. Does that make sense? I've got to approach everybody differently, understand what's in it for them, what motivates them, what's their heart's desire. Ask those 5 whys you just mentioned. The benefit of the benefit, how will it help them?
Yeah.
And that's how you truly get to understanding the individual.
I love that. Love that.
Yeah, I thought you might. That's why I shared it. So it's all good. Just kidding. Andy's going to have fun with this one on the editing. So that's okay. That's good. I know you can handle it. Hey, let's move real quick. I know we've got just a couple more moments here together. I want to move into this idea of the leadership philosophy that I've developed at the Coca-Cola Company over my years. It's this idea of how is greater than what. And the idea is that, how you do something is greater than what you actually achieve. And I always tell people that results matter. You got to get results. Absolutely. But it's how you get there that really matters, that separates you and differentiates you from the pack. How does that resonate with your approach and your thoughts that you share in the life with a capital L?
So you're talking about
Or does it?
how and what? Yes?
Yeah. How and what?
The
Your
how and what.
approach, the way you do something, the method, the way you treat people is more important than actually the results that you might achieve.
Yeah. And again, I'm sorry to bring up bell curve again, but one more time, I'll say bell curve, because paying attention to the health of your people, and you can't do that for too long, because there's a little thing called profit margin that you have to face up to. And so we can't just all sit around and pay attention to the how. We've got to engage with the what. But to engage with the what, I need to, some people would say, is there a chicken and an egg there? I don't think it's as obvious as some people would say. It's yes. Oh, well, we've got the what. Now we got to come up with the how. I think it's cyclical. I think it's something that lends itself to the reflection of that leader, the thoughtfulness of that leader. Melville, Herman Melville, Moby Dick. There's a chapter in that book. It's chapter 62, actually. It's called The Dart. And I thought about this in Maine. I was speaking about calibrating as leaders, as humans. And Melville kind of revolutionized the whaling industry. And I actually dropped by an antique marine shop that had some harpoons from the mid 19th century when Melville wrote the book. But here's what would happen. And the leadership impact has made a difference in my journey, where you got the big ship, heads to where all the whales are. Then you've got the smaller ship with, 6 to 10 oarsmen. At the time that Melville wrote the book, the oarsman was also the harpooner. There's one harpooner at the front, but he also rowed. He had an oar, and so they would row out to the whale, and then that harpooner would put down his oar, pick up the harpoon. In fact, I don't know.
Harpoon?
There's a harpoon back there, and
wow, okay.
A team that I was leading one time, because we had talked a lot about this. It's like 7 feet high. It's a replica, but he would throw the harpoon, and the efficiency rate was way low. I don't remember what he says in the book, but I want to say it was like, it was a 20% efficiency accuracy. Most of your throws would miss. And he said the reason for that is the harpooner is exhausted. And so what he proposed, he said, the harpooner, you might think that this is going to cause a lack of efficiency because you've got one less, sorry for the term, I don't know the marine, one less rower. But at the time, a lot of owners of shipping companies, whaling companies, were looking elsewhere because they're saying, you know what, I don't know that we can make money because of the inefficiency of this. He says, believe your efficiency will actually go up. It's the sharpening the saw, Covey's sharpening the saw. Let the oarsman be still. He used the word idle. And he said, let the harpooners of the world, they must start to their feet and throw their dart from idleness, not out of toil. And as a result, the efficiency went up. And so often from a leadership standpoint, in that cycle of what and how, take the time to evaluate, take the time to be healthy personally, and not just spending all of my time reacting with a how, but evaluate, is the what aligned correctly? Once the what is aligned correctly, then what are the steps to the how? When I go with the steps of the how, I come back to, but are we really accomplishing the what? and seeing that as a cycle. But I need to take the time to do that, even on a daily basis. Right? Are there moments daily? Is there time weekly, monthly, annually, where I'm getting still? Cubby sharpening my saw, maybe you can use that. But just, hey, what's my harpoon? I want to be a healthy human, and I want to throw it out of strength, not out of exhaustion. And I want to think through that strategy accordingly.
That's a great leadership lesson. That's the Harpoon lesson, the Harpoon Principle. Maybe we'll write that down. So that's really good. So thank you. Let's move into the close then here. Let's bring this puppy home. Great conversation, Dave, Matt. Wonderful insights. If you had one thing that you wanted to leave with the audience today, what would that be? What would that message be to them?
Be intentional. You'd ask the question, how can I be fully alive this day in this situation? The intentionality, so often when we're reacting, we're losing the intentionality. And I'm not just referring to the job itself, but who I am as a human being. And for those who are spiritually inclined from a Christianity standpoint, from a gospel standpoint, being intentional about integrating those two. It's, so often we get the lyrics of the gospel, but not the music, and therefore we don't do the dance. And so the intentional savoring of what this moment and the significance of this moment right now is all you and I know for sure that we. And am I just biding my time and looking to the next thing and missing what's right here? So the intentionality regarding prioritizing who I am as a human being who's thirsty to be fully alive.
That's so good. My son got married a couple of weeks ago to Emma.
Congratulations.
And I was his best man. Thank you. He honored me that way. But that was I had 15 minutes with him, just one-on-one, right before we stepped out and go to the ceremony. And my advice to him was just be aware, be intentional, just enjoy the moment where you are there. And it was kind of neat. I had stuck a Kleenex in my tuxedo pocket and standing next to him. And I asked him before we went in there, you think I might need this to bring? He said, yeah. But Matt, in that moment, you could tell he was taking it all in. He was looking at everybody that was there that for he and Emma in the wedding, and they loved him and appreciated and wanted to support him. And he actually started to cry. So I there's a picture of me handing him the thing. But I know that's a very personal note, but that's also from a professional perspective too, that we need to be in the moment, present, appreciating as images of God, and taking all of that in. So that's powerful, and being intentional about that. Great word. Good. Okay. So you okay if we move on to these quick hot seat questions real quick? They're not long answers that we're looking for, just real quick things that might come to your mind. Is that okay?
No, I'm not okay with that.
Well, that was the first question out of 5, and you didn't get it right. So we're going to move to the next one.
Of course.
You like that, right? It's like somebody comes up to you and says, is it okay? Can I ask you a question? I'm like, darn it, you already did. Already interrupted me. So go ahead. What do you got? All right, here are the 5 questions. We'll go through them. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I thought it was going to be about coffee. That's a great question. The best piece of advice that I've ever received, it would have to do with the intentionality aspect and making sure.
Who told you that? Where did that come from, Matt?
My dad.
Your dad.
My dad.
Okay, great.
He was a great business leader, but he was a great man. And I'm thinking, as I think about him, for some reason, this other quote that he gave me: "Work expands to fit the time allotted for it." He would tell me, but that
work contracts.
Yeah, you're not just treading water. Swim somewhere.
So good, love that. Okay, let's go to this next question. You'll like this. If you could have coffee or wine with one historical figure, who would it be and why?
Whoa.
Coffee or wine, or it may be a cup of coffee or wine with something. You could have different people. Up to you. Who would that one?
All right. So am I going back to their time, or are they coming here?
You said you were the creative type, so go for it.
Yeah,
it's your call.
Okay, they're coming here because I don't want to deal with the indoor plumbing stuff if our conversation goes long. I want them to come here with some indoor plumbing. Okay. So the one historical figure, I'm assuming that Jesus isn't a legal answer to. So obviously,
I think it's the best answer, but then the question is, okay, then who next?
Yeah. So from a leadership standpoint, part of it right now, and you're asking me in this cultural moment, I actually might say Abraham Lincoln. And it's just been on my mind, and that's the top of mind. You ask me next week, it would be a different answer. But
Okay.
because of what he was dealing in a country that was divided, the civil unrest, and if he couldn't do it, I'd like to call up Daniel Day-Lewis and say, could I have coffee with you? And would you just act like Abraham Lincoln, like you
In
did in your
character.
Academy Award-winning performance? But from a leadership standpoint, from a perspective, how are you dealing with stress? I feel like he was very honest about the load that was on him. Okay,
Yeah.
you said quit.
John Meacham has a great. No, that was okay. John Meacham has a great book out there about Lincoln, a good biography if you're looking for one on it. What's a book you're reading right now that's influencing your thinking?
Uh, Boys in the Boat, rereading it.
Okay.
So right now,
You're rereading it. Okay. Why would you read it a second time?
Because I saw the movie and I thought, man, this is good. And it reminded me of the impact that the book had from a leadership standpoint, whatever, 3 years ago. Man, it's longer than that when I read it. And so there are not many books that are worth being read. Actually, there are not that many books that are
Except
worth
yours,
being
right?
read cover to cover.
Except your book.
Except that.
Yeah. Of yours.
But just from a leadership standpoint, it's just there's a hard engagement to that. I mean, it's amazing. I haven't even mentioned this. Coming back to that, what's the one piece of advice that you would give? I mentioned intentionality. I don't know how in the world did I not mention something so important? Engaging the heart. Learn to engage your heart. This whole notion of the heart is something that I feel like I was illiterate in for a long time. And I think most of us are, especially guys, because we shift heart over to it's just emotions. Now, heart involves my mind, my emotions, my will. And so a great ball player is somebody that they know the strategy, mind, they're skilled, they can execute, but then they play with passion. And we're to live our lives with passion. We're to engage with the gospel with passion. And one of the phrases that I would use with my boys is fight for your heart, fight with your heart. And FFYH, FWH. I put that. In fact, I just recently I texted one of my sons who was running an Ironman the next day. And it's based on Proverbs 4:23. Above all else, guard your heart. Know what fuels your heart, know what diminishes your heart, and engage it. And it's the heart, that's the needle that connects with the album on the record player that's now an archaeological artifact. And that's what enables us to be intentional.
Yeah, that's great. And what's the question you ask your boys after you watch the movie? Like, suppose they sat down and watched Braveheart. What would you ask them? I think there was a question like, how does that impact you, or how does that engage your heart?
Yeah, somebody asked me, they had read the book and they said, did you really ask them that? And I could call any of them right now and say, okay, Andrew, Joel, Stephen, what did I ask you after every movie? They would, I guarantee you, they would chuckle and they would all give the identical answer. And it's, how did that impact your heart? And so, we didn't get up after a movie at the house, and you actually didn't get up when you're at the theater. Let's pay attention. Now, some people stay seated because they have a competition who can identify the gaffer or whatever. No, that's not what we would do. Just take some time to digest it, to savor it, to taste it, to enter into this moment. So how did it impact my heart? Heart engagement. Am I feeling authentically? Yes. Am I thinking deeply? Am I acting intentionally? How did that movie impact the way that you feel, impact the way that you want to act, impact the way that you want to think? And, early on, I was doing it alongside them. I was illiterate from a heart standpoint. And so I was learning this as well. And initially they would say things like, good. That's how they'd answer the question. How'd that impact your heart?
Okay.
It
Yeah,
was right.
right.
But over time, they started articulating, this is how it impacted me, Dad. And great question on a daily basis. How did a day impact
Oh,
my,
yeah.
what fueled it? What depleted it?
Yeah, that's a great. Am I filled up or not? So that's excellent. Matt, you've been wonderful from an inside perspective. I love your sense of humor. I appreciate your generosity to invest time with us. I can see why this book, your message about fully engaging the heart, being intentional, everything you talked about, hopefully our listeners today will take away something that will benefit them. So I appreciate your time today. Good seeing you.
Great to see you, my friend. I'm grateful for what you're up to. And thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
appreciate that.
what you're
Yep.
doing and the way you're stewarding your journey.
Well, thank you. Trying to do it with heart. Hey, thanks for tuning in to P Cubed. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to share it with others, leave a review, and make sure you sign up for my weekly email that gives leadership insights and maybe even some behind-the-scenes content. You can also follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram to stay connected. I'm Preston Poore, and thanks for listening to P Cubed.